Okay guys, we're back down in the shop today getting to work on part 2 of this engine build series. So if you guys haven't seen part 1 already, that's down below in the description for you. So go check that out. And sorry for the delay on getting to this video. I had some personal stuff come up. Actually I had to get surgery on my shoulder. So we're going to get back into it here today and get pretty far in this engine. So definitely watch to the end and check it out. Alright, since the cases are all ready to go together, the only thing left to do is to put this gasket on, but before we do that, I'm going to install some Maxima waterproof grease. This part's really easy. I'm just going to install a thin layer across the sealing surface of the case. This will just help the gasket have something to stick to during assembly, and also if we end up having to take the cases apart at any point, it'll make it easy. Alright, next we're going to take this Permatex anti-seize lubricant, and we already put it on the other side of these dowel pins in the last video, but we're going to put it on the top side now. Now it's time to install that gasket on there. And around the areas that are open and could get in the way, I'm just going to cut it with some scissors so I don't have to worry about bumping it off the correct spot during assembly. Now we can install the grease to our left side case. Alright, we're just going to give everything one last good look over here and make sure everything's looking the way it's supposed to. We already checked it over, but just make sure everything has lubricant and make sure it's working correctly because you don't want to have to take this case back off again. And everything's looking good, so we're going to take this case and put the crankshaft through this bearing here. It's a press fit, so we're going to have to use an installer tool, but there's no need to heat up that bearing since we're using the installer tool on it. As we're beginning to press these two cases together, we want to make sure that the cases are even on both sides, so one side of the case doesn't get too close to the other one and get ahead, because you could damage the cases. First I'll put this nut on here, and this is what the installer tool will grab onto. This guy is just going to hold that bottom piece down on there so it doesn't come off when we pull on it with the tool. Now we're going to thread the puller rod onto the bottom nut. Alright, now we're going to put the puller body over this assembly we made here, and this little inlet here has to line up with this pin on the headed rod here. And we're just going to see if we can line those two up. There we go. Now this will just sit down on the case. And then we'll take this nut here and tighten it down. And as we tighten this nut down, it's going to pull this threaded rod upwards, thus pushing this piece down into the case. So it'll pull the crankshaft through our left side crankcase here. Now that we got our entire setup here, we're going to take a 27mm socket or a 27mm wrench, and we're going to tighten down to pull the cases together. All these specialty tools I use will be down in the description for you guys. This specialty tool here is a Tusk crankshaft puller and installer tool, and if you're going to be doing a bottom end rebuild, it's pretty much a necessity to have one of these, and they work really well. complete our ratchet pawl assembly. And now we want to line up the indent in our cover piece with the cap on the springs there. Alright, so how this guy works is when you go to turn this and change gears, one of these spring-loaded plates here will brush past, and then the other one will catch in the little hole here. That's why they have these grooves on it. This one will catch right into that groove and force it to turn. If you were upshifting or if you were downshifting, it would catch there. And your ratchet pawls assembly will go in with this bracket here. You want to push up on it to keep those spring-loaded pieces inside that bracket so they don't come flying out when you try and assemble it. And then this one might take you a couple tries. It's pretty difficult to get it to seat in there correctly, but you'll kind of just have to work it around until you get it in. Sometimes you'll have to take a screwdriver and kind of reach around and push down the spring load. See how it pops in there when you push one down. Now we're going to take our spindle piece here that goes through and connects to our gear shift lever, and we're going to put a good amount of assembly lube on it because it goes through an oil seal on the other side and we don't want to tear it. Okay guys, I moved us to another spot with better lighting and also give you guys a little bit better quality, so hopefully you guys enjoy it. And now we're going to run through the shifting assembly. Alright guys, we're starting out in neutral here to demonstrate the shifting assembly, and I'm going to go down one into first, just like if you were riding your motorcycle. Shift down, see that pop down, and now we're in first gear, and I know that because we're spinning back here on the sprocket. It's spinning and I'm not able to stop it when I hold it with my hand. Now we'll go up into second, so that's all the way up. We're gonna pass neutral, and now we're in second. Here's third. Here's fourth. And as you go up each gear, it's going to spin faster on the back sprocket if you keep it going, but it's going to be harder to turn because for each revolution of your shaft here, your sprocket shaft will be spinning faster because you're in a higher gear. If you're in a lower gear, for each turn, you're going to get only a partial rotation as in first gear, so you have more torque going up a hill. I'm going to assemble our Kickstarter gear. I'm using the service manual to do this with the service manual diagram instead of a parts fist, just because this will let me know, hey, this bolt here has a certain torque spec. So it's a little easier in that respect, and it'll also give me a Loctite symbol if I need to use Loctite as well. But here we're going to start with our spring, and then we're going to take our cup here, and then we have our snap ring and our washer, which is already installed on here, and we're going to install it. Now, this is where a lot of people mess up. You got to time your Kickstarter gear. So there's a little dimple. Yeah, you can see there's a little dimple, and you want to line these two dimples up, these two right here, as you slide it down onto this gear here where they connect. And you want to make sure that's timed correctly, or else this gear won't fully disengage, or your Kickstarter will be out of time and you'll have issues. Now we're going to pop on the spring, and we come to our gear, and then we have a washer after. Yep, we have a washer there. So we know we have a washer. And then we're going to take this guy. And this is what hooks up to our spring and pop it on there. After you get all of this on here, there's going to be a little hole that you're going to want to line it up with, because this end of the spring is going to fit into that. So we're going to take our spring and work it over, pop it into that hole there. And now this is all ready, so we got to put our bracket in there. It doesn't call for a torque spec on this one, so I'm going to go pretty much probably around 8 foot-pounds just by feeling it with my hand. I'm going to go right till it grabs into that aluminum, and then maybe another 1/8 of a turn. Now I'm going to take our already assembled kickstart gear and spring and insert it into the hole it goes into with some assembly lube on the end. And now I'm going to pull the spring around, make sure it feels like it's loaded and there's some tension on it, and insert it into the hole that it's supposed to go into. Another thing to note is this gear should be free spinning when you put it in. If it's not and you're getting like it's hitting the other gear, it's like ratcheting on it, like that kind of a noise, then you have a issue and you need to tend to that, because you don't want to put it all the way back together and then have this not be assembled correctly. It needs to be free spinning because it runs off your idler gear and then your clutch and your crankshaft. So in the crankshaft spinning, this gear is always spinning. It only engages when you twist this when you twist that to kick it. That's the only time that bottom gear engages with it. Alright, well, we got the kickstart back in there, and now I'm going to put the idler gear on. As you can see, there's a washer that goes before it on our diagram here. So before I do that, remember to put some assembly lube on this so it's lubricated. Put our washer on there, and then our gear. This gear is even on both sides, so it doesn't matter which way you put it on. I personally like to install the primary gear before the clutch assembly, so I'm going to start off with this collar piece. As you can see, it goes before the primary gear, and I'll remember to put some assembly lube on because I'm going to push it through this oil seal on the crankshaft. Pop that in there. There we go. Now that we got that in, we can install our primary gear, and it's the same on both sides, so it's not going to matter which way we put it on. And then we can install our primary drive bolt and the washer. I'm just going to put this in for now, and then later we're going to torque it down the rest of the way. Alright, so now it's time to install our clutch, and we really can't mess this up because this diagram that was in our service manual really makes it easy. It tells us each part that goes on in the order. So we're going to take our outer guide, use some assembly lube on our shaft, and install our outer guide. And yeah, that spins nice on there. And then we're going to take some more assembly lube, put it on our outer guide, and we see we have our needle bearing next. So we're going to install our needle bearing. And then after our needle bearing, I'm just turning these to work the assembly lube in. After our needle bearing, we're going to put on our clutch outer basket here. And this is, you just want to turn it a little bit and then it'll pop down in there. So if you're having trouble, just try twisting it or moving these gears around and it'll move in. And this is what actually connects the movement of our crankshaft to our transmission, and in turn our sprocket to our rear wheel. So when this rotates, it's turning the rear wheel and the transmission, but technically we're still not connected to the transmission, because though this turns everything, it's not connected to the transmission. As you can see, the transmission main shaft still spins separately. So that's where our inner clutch basket comes in, but we don't want to forget our thrust washer that goes in here first. We'll install our thrust washer, and then we're going to install our inner clutch basket. I'm going to put some assembly lube on that thrust washer though. I'm going to install our inner clutch basket. And then after this, we have another thrust washer that goes here. And then our locking tab one here. Now this one, I don't like to reuse these. As you can see, it's still from taking it off when the tabs fold up. I damaged it. I mean, you have to take them off, but I don't like to reuse these because the metal gets flimsy on them. So I'm gonna order a new one, but for the sake of this video, I'm gonna use this one. Now we can install this nut. I usually put Loctite on these even if it doesn't call for it, because I've had issues with these ones coming off even when they're torqued down. Okay, like I said, I've had these come off before, so it's very important to torque these down to the manufacturer's torque specification. In this case, in the service manual, it was 59 foot-pounds. So to do this, as you can see, the inner basket is going to spin when you try and tighten it, so you're going to need a tool. And what I have here is the Tusk clutch holding tool. And how you're going to do it is you install the tool like so. You just want light, very light grip on the inner hub. You want enough to where it's not going to slip off, but too much and you could really damage the inner hub and it'll strip or it'll crack the outer edge of it because it's really soft aluminum. Now that we got our nut torqued down on there, we could take a pair of angled pliers and put one end in the main shaft, being careful not to damage the threads, and the other end using to bend our lock washer up into place. Alright, now it's time to put our clutch plates in. I accidentally ordered the wrong clutch plates. This is for a YZ250 2005 and the part numbers are slightly different, but they still fit in here, so I'm going to put them in for the just to show you guys how it works, and then later on in this build series I'm probably going to be doing these as a giveaway. So if any of you guys got a YZ250, make sure to check out the later videos for the giveaway on these clutch plates. But normally you would soak these overnight in oil, the friction plates. I didn't do that because I'm not reusing them obviously, but starts off with a friction plate. So we alternate between a friction and a steel plate. And we just one at a time just alternate and drop them in there. Well, it turns out those friction plates didn't fit, so I'm just going to put these old ones in there. One thing you'll notice with the steel clutch plates is one end has a sharper edge to it and the other is a more rounded edge. So you'll want to put either all sharp edges down or all round edges down. You don't want to mix and match them. It doesn't matter which end is down though. And I run Tusk competition plates on all my bikes because they're pretty affordable and they seem to work really well. So I'll put those down in the description, as well as all the other specialty tools I've used. Alright, now we can go ahead and install our lifter rod here. So, as you can see, the lifter rod goes through, and then the lifter, and then our pressure plate. And basically, now you can see when we spin the transmission, these plates are not, when the pressure plate is on here and you have your springs clamped down, these plates will be pushed together, and in turn the friction on these plates will grab the inner clutch basket and turn the entire engine. But when there's no pressure on them, you can see it spins freely. That's why when you press the clutch and this guy pushes out the springs, then it's basically like being in neutral and it allows it to spin freely. So we put our lifter rod in there, and I'm going to put the cap on him. There we go. And oops, almost forgot. Put some assembly lube in there for it. There we go. Okay, now we can put on our clutch pressure plate. That's why they call it the pressure plate, because the springs push down and the entire motor turns together. No pressure, motor turns separately. Now we can pop in the springs and get our bolts threaded in a little bit. Okay, I'm going to start tightening these down with the impact just until they're flush. Not going to go any tighter than that, and make sure you're working in a star pattern. The reason why you want to make sure you tighten these down in a star pattern is because I've seen a lot of people break the inner clutch basket hubs off when they're tightening down like one side at a time. So you want to work in that star pattern. And now I'm going to finish it off with the hand tools to about 6 foot-pounds. Alright, now it's time to tighten our primary drive gear bolt, and that's going to be needed to be tightened down to 47 foot-pounds. So to do that, I'm going to use this Motion Pro gear stopper, because as we turn this, everything's going to turn, so we're going to need to jam something in there. You could probably try and use a towel or something, but I definitely recommend using this. It's real handy, and they're pretty cheap to pick up. It's got a magnet that sticks to the gear to hold it in place, and as it just put it into your clutch gear here, and as you rotate it, it'll lock in like that. So when you go to tighten this down, I'm going to torque it down to 47 foot-pounds. It'll stay on there. Okay, now before we forget, we're going to want to install our flywheel key and then wedge it in with a screwdriver here. And I'm just using the flywheel key off the old crankshaft since it didn't come with the kit. Okay, now we're going to install our clutch arm and put some assembly lube on it because it goes through an oil seal. And this is what, if you push it forward or pull on it with the cable, this is where the cable attaches and actually pushes and disengages and engages the clutch. Now we can install our stator assembly. Basically how this works here is each time the flywheel attaches to the crankshaft and spins around here, it generates electricity to create a spark, and it also sends a signal through this trigger coil here to the CDI unit to send spark to the spark plugs. So this is your trigger coil, this is your actual, they call it a stator, an alternator, magneto, you can call it many different things, but basically it's generating electricity to send spark to your spark plugs. On a bike that needs to run headlights, like a WR450R, something like that, it's going to have a much larger stator because it needs to run more components off of it. Now we can install our flywheel. We want to make sure our keyway matches up with the keyway, with the key on the crankshaft. And now to verify that your key has fully seated in the keyway, you can give a couple turns of the crankshaft just to make sure. Okay, the next step is to torque our flywheel bolt down to 40 foot-pounds. Normally, on most bikes, you're going to have holes in your flywheel, so you can take your clutch holder tool and install it into that holes and actually hold it while you're torquing it down. But some of the smaller bikes have a smooth flywheel, and you can't do that, so that's when your Motion Pro gear jammer comes in handy again. You can actually jam the gears on the other side of the engine while you tighten this down. Okay, this is a 16 millimeter bolt, and I'm going to torque it down to 40 foot-pounds. Alright guys, this is as far as we're going to get for part 2, but stay tuned for part 3 because we're really going to dress this engine up and make it look amazing. And also don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.